Hello, today what I'm going to do is show you how to make a cover for an instrument bell to protect for COVID. The first thing that you are going to need to do is you're going to need to find fabric that is appropriate and safe to use. The kind of fabric you need to find is recommended to be 80 denier. It's kind of hard to find because 80 denier is typically what you find in hosiery, and it is a thick, opaque tight. This is great if you're doing something with a bell size of a trumpet or smaller, but if you have anything bigger, you're going to need to go to a fabric store and find an athletic fabric that is opaque, which means you can't see through it very well. If you hold it up to the light, not very much light comes through. It does need to have a stretch to it. The fabric that I found, this blue fabric, is nylon, about 80% nylon and about 20% spandex, so it gives a little bit of the fabric. It has a little bit of a shine to it. So the first thing you're going to need to do is find your instrument and make a template. The way you do that is you trace the bell and add 1 more inch around the bell so that you have the diameter that'll end up being 2 inches bigger than the diameter of the bell. Once you have that, you're going to place it on your fabric and you're going to trace around it and have 2 cutouts of fabric. Put the right sides together and pin them. I recommend that you put 2 pins close to each other because you're going to need to sew around the edge and keep an opening so that you can flip it right side out when you're done sewing the first seam. I recommend also that you use a color of thread that matches, but I'm going to be using white thread today so you can kind of see what the thread looks like for the sewing. So once you have your machine, you could do this by hand, but it would take a lot longer. If you have a machine, I'm using a 1/4 foot, which is a 1/4 of an inch, and I'm just gonna line that foot up next to my first pin. I'm gonna take the first pin out, and I'm going to back stitch just a little bit so that when I flip it, it holds tight. And then I'm going to stretch the fabric as I'm sewing. What that does is it makes it so that when you stretch the fabric later on, you are not pulling at the threads and the threads don't pop. You don't need to stretch it really tight, but just give it a little bit of a tug, and it'll also help keep the 2 pieces together. Now this isn't an exact science. If it doesn't match up exactly, that's okay. If it's not exactly a 1/4 inch, it's fine. The nature of this material is it's gonna flex enough, it's pretty forgiving. So you're gonna go all the way around until you come back to that first pin. And then again, I'm gonna back stitch just a little bit. When you're finished with that, you're gonna take your scissors and trim up so that you don't have the excess string that gets in the way. So now you see that it just goes around and you have the opening. The next thing you're gonna do is you're going to simply flip this around so that it is right side out. Take your fingers in and kind of just push it out so that you get closer to that circle shape. I've also found that once you get close to this shape, just taking the material and kind of stretching it out, it'll get it closer to that original circle. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to sew around on the inside, and what that's going to do, it's going to create a pocket to put the elastic. I use 5/8 of an inch. It's just a marking I have on my sewing machine, and it's really easy to follow. Again, I'm going to keep it kind of tight as I'm sewing. I do back stitch a little bit just so it doesn't pull. And again, this one doesn't have to be exact. You just want to make sure you keep enough room so that elastic can go through. So once you're finished with that, go ahead and trim up the ugly little extra threads that you have. And now it's time for your elastic. So you're gonna go back into the hole that you had originally created, and you're going to choose an elastic. This one is a nice thick this one's a 3/8 of an inch elastic, which works great. You can go down a little bit. I would keep it a little bit thicker so it actually can hold on to the instrument. You don't want it to get too thick though, because then it just doesn't have as much of a nice stretch to it. If you have a smaller instrument with a smaller bell like a clarinet, you may want to go a little bit less of a thickness. You saw I have a safety pin on this. It just helps to push the elastic all the way through the material. There really isn't a front or a back to these, so you don't really need to worry about correct side. Just go ahead and get it all the way through. It does stick a little bit, it's okay. You'll be able to even that out once you get it all the way through. When you get back and you have your safety pin come back out, before you pull too much, I would recommend you actually open up your safety pin and connect it to the other piece of elastic. Now, for this, I have used 11 inches of elastic. You kind of have to play around a little bit with your instrument to try to figure out what the size is. What I kind of determined is you take the diameter plus 1/2 of a diameter of your template, and that's pretty close. So then you're going to overlap the elastic just a little bit, and you're going to put it back into your machine. You could hand stitch this as well. I just think machine is easier. And I do a forward and a back stitch a couple of times. And I set the needle down, and I like to just kind of run it up the length of the elastic a little bit. It doesn't have to be straight, just to give it a little bit more stability. Once you have that done, you can snip your extra pieces, and you are almost finished. The last step you need to do, got one more piece, is pull the elastic back in and then close up that hole. Again, you could, if you want to be really neat and tidy, you can hand sew that. I like to use the machine because it goes a lot faster if you're having to make several of these. Try not to sew onto the elastic. That way the elastic kind of floats a little more freely within your pocket. Trim your last little threads up, and you're done. You just move the elastic around, and then you can get out your instrument. And there you go. Hopefully that helps, and good luck. Thank you.